What's up, folks, and welcome to a happy edition of the Shots Fired podcast with DP. I'm your host, Jay Simino, aka Despop, and today is 16 April 2026. I'm sure you've all heard by now of the recent vacating of criminal charges pertaining to several J6ers, most of whom were tried and sentenced above and beyond what is humanly imaginable, or in my opinion, legal. For those that haven't heard yet, I insist you catch the Kyle Seraphin show from yesterday titled Special Joe Biggs Update. Listen to this man's story and tell me again how we have the best system of justice. Now, I'll readily admit that we probably do have the best system in the world, but not the best system, as in it could be a lot bester than it is. It is the best because of our Constitution, but also jury of your peers. But it is also the worst at times because jury of your peers. I'm here to tell you folks firsthand that jurors are very often fucking retarded, straight up, especially those on a grand jury panel. Now, grand juries are supposed to be another layer of protection for the defendants, an independent panel who decides that yes, there is enough evidence here to make an arrest and pass this case on for trial. It's supposed to add legitimacy to the process. It does not. The old saying is that you can indict a ham sandwich for murder, and it's true. You can indict anyone for anything. The grand jurors often go with whatever the prosecution suggests. Not that they outright suggest it, but when you're impaneled for 3 to 6 months, you kind of get a feel for what the master wants. Take my case, for instance. I was a detective in Rhode Island back in the day, and my own department came after me. I had the opportunity that most don't get as a defendant. I had a chance to testify in front of my grand jury, and I was the last witness to speak. I had no idea what anyone prior to me had testified to. Well, as soon as I entered the room and before I even raised my right hand, I totally knew I was indicted. It didn't matter what I was about to say. The looks of disgust at the mere sight of me by the jurors, the hems, the haws. Sure enough, I was unfortunately correct. After my indictment, I received the grand jury recordings through discovery. The prosecution had them transcribed but wouldn't release those to me. I had to pay thousands to get mine transcribed on my own. I can tell you from that day in 2007 until today, I have listened to and read through my grand jury proceedings several times, and I still can't tell you why the fuck they came to a true bill. I obviously can't read the room, nor do I have access to anything said when the recorder was off. So the only conclusion I came up with was this: the grand jurors were fucking retarded. My case proceeded to trial, and when I was faced with the choice of a bench trial, meaning a judge decides, or a jury trial, I said to my attorney, fuck a jury. A jury indicted me. I would expect a judge to be a tad smarter. My case made it to summary judgment, the halfway point in a trial, and after the state rested its case, my attorney stood up, as is customary, and basically said, Your Honor, that's the entirety of their case, and they haven't proven shit. Do we even have to put on a defense? The judge tossed the case right there, meaning I was innocent. There's a difference between not guilty and innocent, people. Not guilty is a finding by a court. Innocent is fucking innocent. That's how bad the case was, and that's how retarded the grand jurors were. See, folks, in our system, we all know that lawyers are sharks, but we normally apply that title to defense attorneys, and they are total scumbags. And I know their defense is always, I'm just doing my job. Bullshit. Unless you're assigned the case as a public defender and have no choice, if you're a private attorney, you don't have to take the case, period. So getting up there and lying and scheming when you know your murderous and rapist or pedophilic client is 1,000,000% guilty makes you a vile scumbag in my eyes. And I hope your maker makes you pay for that ultimately. But What the public doesn't typically know is that most prosecutors are fucking worse. Why? Because of that pesky document called the Constitution. They have rules, but winning above all else is their only rule. Our system, on paper at least, is the best. But when they hold exculpatory, exonerating evidence from grand juries, when they don't turn over all the evidence to the defense and discovery, when they pressure witnesses to outright fucking lie in open court, then the best system in the world collapses. It really is that simple. If they don't have it, they can't bring it. That's it. If they don't have the case shouldn't be brought. It's not a fucking game. It's not a fucking gamble. It's not a fucking crapshoot. But I found far too often that prosecutors, our sworn protectors, often create a case when there is none. I once had a female prosecutor yell at me after I testified. Her complaint was I was too honest. Right hand of God. She honestly scolded me saying, "You didn't have to be so honest." Imagine saying that to a fucking police detective after I testified. Naturally, the defense attorney thanked me for my honesty. This was all after I was exonerated in my own case and went back to the job. I knew what it was like to sit in the defendant's chair, so I got the reputation that I wouldn't play the game for either side because of what I had gone through. The evidence speaks for itself. And I'll tell you something. I had more guilty pleas than most because the defense attorneys learned that I wouldn't lie, and therefore I would never stumble on the stand. Half their game is trying to make you look like a fool, even if what they nail you on is completely irrelevant to the guilt or innocence of their client. They're playing to the emotions and life experience of retarded jurors who can't see through the game. So, I don't have an opinion one way or the other on the guilt or innocence of any J6er, but I have a strong opinion on how they were treated, as in the feds never had a legit fucking case. Trespassing is simple. In and out. Misdemeanor, no jail time, pay your fine. But what did they do to those that never raised a hand to a single police officer that day? That was abhorrent and inexcusable, unforgivable in my eyes. So seeing those like Joe Biggs finally get his true justice makes me feel like I did that day the judge said, "Get the fuck out of my courtroom, case dismissed," right after he verbally teabagged the prosecutors for even bringing the case. Congrats to Joe and all those affected by this latest announcement. I thought mine was bad, but I can never imagine having to face the federal government and their legal snipers at the DOJ and FBI. Hats off to you, sir. Thank you to 47 for finally giving us just the smallest fucking morsel of what you promised. It sure took you fucking long enough, you asshole. Now it's time to free my boy, Radio, aka Brian Cole. And now it's time for the final call. On this date, April 16th, in 2003, Detective Charles Randall Smith of the Evangeline Parish Sheriff's Department, Louisiana, was shot and killed while he and other officers attempted to serve a search warrant and arrest warrant on a man wanted for escaping from the parish jail. The officers had received information that the suspect was in a trailer owned by the family at 213 Point Street in Mamo. When the officers arrived, the family refused to let the officers in, so the officers waited at the scene while the warrant was sworn out. Once the warrant was received, Detective Smith and a second deputy attempted to enter the house, but the suspect opened fire and shot Detective Smith in the chest. Detective Smith was able to make it to a yard next door before collapsing. Other officers were unable to make it to his location because the suspect was pinning them down with gunfire. The suspect eventually came out of the home holding his gun and was shot and killed. By the time rescue personnel were able to make it to Detective Smith's location, he had died. Detective Smith had served with the Evangeline Parish Sheriff's Department for 3 years. He was survived by his wife and 10-year-old son. Also on this date, back in 1961, Deputy Sheriff Edward G. Byrne of the Marion County Sheriff's Office, Indiana, was shot and killed while responding to a robbery call at a local tavern at 9 a.m. Upon his arrival, he stopped a vehicle at the 6300 block of East 10th Street that was leaving the tavern. He had returned to his patrol car when he was shot by one of its occupants. Deputy Byrne was known for wearing his campaign hat and as he sat in his patrol car, it was through the brim of the hat that did not permit him to observe the suspect's movement outside when he was shot. 3 suspects were apprehended. 1 pleaded guilty to armed robbery. The second received life with eligibility parole in 15 years and died in prison. Those 2 testified against the 3rd subject, who was convicted and sentenced to death. He spent 14 years appealing his sentence and going back and forth to a mental institution before being convicted and given life. He died in 1995. Deputy Byrne had served with the Marion County Sheriff's Department for only 9 months. He was survived by his expectant wife. And lastly, on this date, April 16, 1913, Marshal Clement Howard of the Chauncey PD, Ohio, was shot and killed as he, a local constable, and 2 deputized citizens attempted to arrest the suspect who had shot another man in the head earlier in the evening. When the officers arrived at the location, they asked who had been doing the shooting. The suspect stated he did not know, took a few steps back, and then started shooting at the officers, striking the constable and Marshal Howard. Both officers returned fire, striking the suspect 7 times. Despite being wounded, the suspect ran from the scene and hid behind a pile of railroad ties. He was found dead behind the ties after other officers arrived at the scene and began searching for him. Marshal Howard succumbed to his wounds. 2 days after the shooting, he was survived by his father and 4 brothers. May they all continue to rest in peace. And we'll wrap up like we always do with the timeline cleanse. But before that, to those out there struggling with that mental demon, remember to stop, breathe, survive. Later, bitches.
You see? Holiday. And right now, you can save £50 per person.
Get him, Jay.
I'm not a cop.
You got DP'd.